Well, Roger, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great having you on the podcast.
I appreciate it, Cheryl. Great to be here.
I wanted to start off by having you tell me a little bit about your background in publishing and what led you to launch schoolauction.net.
Yeah, as you can kind of see in the background, books are important to me, and I started my career out really early on in book publishing. But that led me through various things to technology, to publishing online, et cetera, and that leads to the whole big world of internet-based businesses, which is something I then chose to work in for about 20 years. And when we moved from New York City to Portland, Oregon, which is where we live right now, lovely place, um, I was working in tech, working for various tech companies, and got laid off. And, as one does when one gets laid off, you print up business cards and call yourself a consultant, and you throw them around everywhere, and you hope somebody pays attention. And I did manage to get the attention of some other guys here in town who were also parents of young children, who were also very involved in their education. I was PTA president at the time, and we were looking around to do a fundraiser for my PTA. I got connected with these other guys who had built something for their school, which is in the same neighborhood. And we decided to commercialize the product. We decided to take it out there because it looked better than anything else we'd seen out there. So we started that, and here we are 20 plus years later.
Well, I love stories that start with recognizing that there's a need out there,
Yeah.
even if that need is really niched. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I can solve a problem. And I know that when you joined the PTA, you saw a problem.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely saw a problem, which
Yeah.
was that we were conducting our annual fundraising event. We held a little gala with a silent auction and a live auction and things like that. This is an elementary school PTA, and that worked out really well. But everybody up until that point had been doing everything manually. They'd been doing it with spiral notebooks and knuckle busters to process credit cards. And it's like, folks, we're living in a time where things can get easier. And I started looking around because I was a software guy. I was a tech guy. It's like, I know what software can do. There's got to be some software out there for this. And it turns out there was, and it wasn't really appropriate for schools. It was generally more appropriate for really high-end nonprofits, for the kinds of galas that you see on TV shows, right? So we decided to bring out a product that would make running a gala cost effective, make it easy enough to do with the kind of skeleton crew that a PTA is going to be able to cobble together. A skeleton crew of volunteers, by the way, that are going to, go somewhere else the next year. You can't count on them to be repeat users. So all this time you spend training them, is really only useful for 1 year. And we set up our company around this set of particular needs
Right.
to meet them.
So tell us a little bit about what your company does and the support that you give to
Sure.
schools.
Sure. So when it comes to fundraising events like this, it's usually, I think, useful to start out by thinking about the guest experience and what kind of thing you want to put out there. Generally, for most of my school customers, at a fundraising event, there will be somewhere between 2 and 6 different mechanisms that the charity is going to use to solicit donations from people in the room, to suck money out of the fat wallets.
Mhm.
There's a variety of tools you can use this. You can use auctions, both live and silent, maybe raffles, maybe you sell merch, maybe you simply take donations. But if you're thinking about this is a guest coming into a room. You need the guest to be able to move through the entire experience while they are feeling good and generous. We want to avoid any moment during this magical evening where the guest starts to feel annoyed. Why would a guest feel annoyed? You know, they would feel annoyed because you're making them stand in line for a long time. They would feel annoyed because they're just trying to pay you after the event and just get home, and you're making them go through a whole process to do that, And so I like to think of a fundraising event as a department store
Mm.
that's only open for 6 hours a year. And if you think about what do you need at a department store to conduct business during the course of a day, you need inventory management, you need sales management, you need payment processing, you need merchandising, all of the stuff, you need in order to conduct the event at somewhat of a professional level.
Right.
And can you hack all of that with manual work? You can, but it's going to take you 3 to 4 times the number of volunteers than it would take you if you just had some efficient software in place to handle
Yeah,
a lot
and
of that for you.
I love that you're coming at this from the perspective of the person attending the event, because I've been at fundraising events where it's time to check out and I'm tired and I want to go home. Might have eaten too much food. I'm like, "Oh god, now I gotta do all this."
They might have had dancing, you might be a little
Yeah,
sweaty, you might be a little drunk, these things happen. And yeah,
these
and the
things
guest,
happen. Yeah.
yeah, and the most critical thing for an organization that's going to run a fundraising event is that it's critical to understand that what you do this year for this year's fundraising event is the basis for next year.
Yes.
It is setting the basis for how your guests can expect to be treated next year.
Yeah.
So that when you go to start selling tickets next year to that event, people will receive the invitation gratefully if they had a good time.
Yeah.
If they had a bad time, they might not buy tickets, and then you might not have a successful fundraiser.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners on this podcast are higher ed
Right.
marketers
Of
and in
course.
advancement, and just hearing you talk about the experience of someone at the fundraiser and developing technology to help that experience better reminds me so much of just like everyday problems in higher education where it's like, why do we make things harder than they have to be? Like, you want somebody to come back, you want them to donate, you want them to have a good experience. Let's
Hmm.
focus on improving their experience.
And I think where current development directors are really, really, really strong, exceptionally strong, this is what they do and they do it well, is with that kind of cultivation on a one-to-one basis
Right.
with donors. Identify your most important supporters of a given school or a given program or whatever, and focus efforts on those. And if you can get away with just doing that, just do that because that's a better way to do things. It's much more efficient. But if you're going to need the help of smaller donors, if you're going to need the help of mid-sized donors, if you want to incorporate donor cultivation into the mix here, events are one great way to develop donors. You can bring them in, you have them captive for a couple of hours, you can introduce your programs to them, and you can cater to what it would take to bring them along the pathway.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that a lot of higher education development directors get caught up in with events, events are not the most popular way to raise money. They
Right.
just aren't, right? And that's for a couple of reasons. Their work and many development directors wind up thinking like, at best, I'm going to break even,
Yeah.
because I have to. And then when they're thinking about the things that they have to do for a gala, they're naturally thinking about their biggest donors. They're thinking about what do I have to do to impress the fattest of the fat wallets in the room, right? And that makes sense. That's really good strategy there. That's where you're going to get a lot of your money. But if you want to do donor cultivation as well, you need to you need to probably change some of the positioning so that you're designing the event for the younger donors, for the smaller donors, for the mid-sized donors that you want to progress through your donor development cycle there.
Yeah.
Um, and this is where I get to a point that I make a lot of times regarding galas. They don't have to be break even at best. They should be run as fundraisers. They should be run as enterprises that are going to be a net positive to the organization. And they can be. They absolutely can be. You don't have to make them into the highest of high end galas with ice sculptures everywhere and what have you. You really don't.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, elementary school PTAs, churches, local food banks figured this out a long, long time ago. They use events very effectively to do fundraising. It seems like it's just been more of an issue at the high end. Events kind of have a little bit of a reputation problem up there. And I'm hoping to change that a little bit. I don't think it should necessarily, like I say, it should never replace those donor cultivation efforts that are already going on. Events should never replace those, but they can be an important part of the mix right now, especially in an environment where federal grants are being placed under review and canceled and revised, and there is downstream pressure on private foundations to make up the difference for the federal grants, and everybody's kind of reassessing here. And in a time like this, I tend to think that events where you spread this out, you are trying to cultivate the largest number of people to participate in a fundraiser rather than the strategic people. You want the largest number of people in here. I think there's a place for that in the fundraising mix. At higher education and at other places. And we do work with a lot of universities, including the one where I went and got my MBA. They were kind enough to become a customer afterwards, and I work really closely with them as a result. So
You make such a great point because we see this in the political sphere, especially in the last decade, that candidates that are often the most successful are ones that have a whole lot of small donations, right? Everybody wants the big donations, but the grassroots fundraising, the small, the 5, the 10, the 15, the $50 donations, they can really add up and make a difference. And I love that you said, you don't need to do a fundraiser with a ice sculpture and trapeze artists, and it can be something simple and
absolutely,
successful. And what kind of
absolutely.
things have you seen that have been working well for organizations?
Well, I'm going to tell you about my favorite event that I have seen at the university level. It happens here at Portland State University, where I got my MBA. Go Vikings. And it's with their music school. And their music, the campus is a campus-wide license. We work with a lot of different schools and teams to do their individual fundraisers. But the one that's really closest to my heart is the music school one. Small event, usually about 125 to 150 guests, pretty well cultivated. And the music school has students perform 4 songs during the course of this. And they space them out. They don't do it as a concert. It's just like, let's hear from the students again. And the students are all dressed to the nines. These are 20-year-olds who don't really know how to wear formal wear, but they got some and they put it on, and everybody loves to look at them looking a little awkward. And then they sing beautifully. And everybody's there for the singing. Everybody's there to support the school. The only kind of auction they do is that they will auction off private performances by the students. They'll usually do 1 or 2 of those, and those go for big, big, big money in the audience. And then they do a special appeal, and they're over with the whole thing in about 2 hours.
Mm.
It's really a compact event. And every year we get people in and out of there, and they're all just gushing over how wonderful the singing was on the way out the door, which is, of course, the mindset we want them to be in when they're leaving the event, right? We want them to think that this was not a fundraiser I went to. This was the best event on my social calendar this week, and then maybe they'll buy tickets next year and you continue to move them along.
That's such a great example, and also an example of how you don't have to fundraise for your entire organization at every event. You
Oh,
can
no, of course
focus
not.
on music or athletics, and you can make events
Absolutely.
that are relevant. Like one of my favorite events to attend as a business owner for one of our clients does a golf tournament to
Sure.
support athletic scholarships. And we have to get our tickets. It's the tournament's in April, and she just sent the save the date out in September because she sells out every single year. She sells out by
Yeah.
December. And
Yeah, the thing about golf tournaments, which are great fundraising events, is that they usually have a cap on the audience of
right.
144. That's usually about any of the maximum number of golfers that can
Yeah.
attend. And then you hope to pad around it with, people coming for dinner afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what the event is. And we actually skip out of dinner. I hope she's not listening. She's totally gonna listen to this podcast, by the way, because she's a fundraiser.
Gotcha.
We do skip
That's
out of dinner, but I always participate in the auction. So I
good.
do and in fact, I am going to a comedy show this weekend that I won in her auction. So she got us golfing and she got us bidding on a package. So
Fantastic. And you're going to use the package. That's good.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
there's always great things going on there.
Yeah.
So what are some tips for those organizations out there that are looking to start a really manageable event? Maybe they haven't done anything before and they're looking to get started. What tips do you have for them?
Definitely start small. Um, you're going to need to introduce the concept of an annual fundraising event to your donor database. They're going to need to start learning that this is a thing you're going to do and this is about how you're going to do it. And so your first year is going to be a warm up year, really. You should aim to make some money. You should always aim to make some money, but I wouldn't necessarily count on it for enormous money the first year. First year, maybe all you're doing is you're establishing that you're going to hold a fundraising event. Maybe the first one you only do online. Do an online silent auction about the simplest possible thing you can do. Get some donated items, put them up online, define a bidding period, go. If you want to add a gala, if you want to have people get together in person, and personally, I think there's a lot of reason to do so.
Mhm.
Community works really well as a tool for fundraising. So getting people together to enjoy each other's company is a good idea. If you're going to do that, then you start with maybe a silent auction. Maybe you also do a raffle and then add things in as you get your feet underneath you. Establish first that you're going to be able to mount the event. You're going to be able to move guests through the event efficiently, and you're going to be able to get paid efficiently at the end. Those are the first three things you have to establish out there. Then, once you've done that, you can start adding in things to further stimulate the fundraising. Maybe this is when you add in sign up parties or you add in a big raffle or you add in, maybe this is where you add in a live auction. As soon as you can get to the point where you can add in a live auction, as soon as you get to the point where you can have an event with a mediator up on stage, then you can hold a special appeal. And I presume that everybody here has done a special appeal and therefore knows that they're insanely great fundraising moments. Give you a little statistic. Over the last 20 years, looking at our customer database, if an event had a special appeal as part of its fundraising, then that special appeal was worth about 50% of what the event raised.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's where you're getting to. You want to get to a point where you're definitely able to use that particular tool, the special appeal, with a particular good, well developed crowd in front of it. And that might take you 2 or 3 years to get there if you have a small crew. You can scale faster with more staff paying attention. You can scale faster if you have a little bit larger budget. But if somebody's really just kind of getting started and they need it to be a fundraiser the first year, which I'm way in favor of, make money from year one. Start with something simple that's going to require less overhead, less labor. And as you get your feet underneath you and you start reworking the events in and, accumulating people on staff who have experience with events, et cetera, then you can grow it, make it bigger. We do generally have like a 5-year plan we can work on with customers where this is not in the software, it's just consulting that we give on the side, and we do that for free for our customers. Because really, at the end of the day, this works for all of us if we're working with you to develop a program over years. If it's a one and done, that's nice, but nobody's actually really getting anything done there.
Yeah, I think that is such sage advice. And it goes for marketing too. It's like you're not always going to hit a home run the first time
No, of
you
course.
swing. Like it takes years to build something successful. And so
Yeah,
start small and build on it. And pretty soon it gets easier and easier and better.
indeed.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a quick break and listen to our sponsor, EdTech Connect. And it's such a great sponsor for this episode because the EdTech Connect is a platform that was started because the owner saw a need of colleges not being able to find technology like yours, Roger, to support their goals. So we're going to listen a little bit to our sponsor and we'll be right back.
How do higher education decision makers find the right solution when technology evolves at light speed? Well, we usually start with our network. EdTech Connect is the network that's democratizing the higher ed technology conversation. EdTech Connect is free, so anyone with a .edu email address can sign up and list the software and services they use in their role at their school. Once you're in, you can find out what solutions similar schools are doing all over the country. Whether you're looking to find the hot new AI tool, or maybe learn options you have to upgrade your campus search engine, or even get to your short list of marketing solution vendors, EdTech Connect is the place to go. So visit edtechconnect.com and set up your free profile to get a pulse for what's happening with higher ed technology today.
Okay. So before the break, you gave some really great advice about how to start small with an annual event and build on it. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into your tool and tools that people can use to support their fundraising efforts. We talked a while ago. I can't even remember. We were just talking before we started. It seems like it's been like months. We talked a little bit about fundraising software pricing models. And I wanted for you to explain to the audience, what they should be looking for when they're looking for support and what some of these different models are.
Yeah, there are three big pricing models that are prevalent in our industry. Um, the one that I prefer, and we have provisioned our software on this basis for 20 years, is as an annual subscription, an annual fixed fee subscription, where a school would pay up front a license fee to use the software for the year. And then there are no variable costs associated with it other than credit card processing. Unfortunately, I can't stop the credit card processing banks from charging for their services. So that's going to happen. But other than that, it's a fixed fee. The organization gets to use the software for a full year across multiple fundraisers, et cetera, et cetera. I find that to be a really cost-effective way to go. It does require a little bit more of an investment up front. You have to pay the full SaaS fee up front. And since that's all we're getting paid, we have to charge it at a level that allows us to stay in business. And hopefully make a little bit of money, but not too much. We're dealing with nonprofits. I can't make too much money. So the second pricing model is kind of the historical pricing model, where organizations pay some fee up front, but then they also pay the software company not the credit card processor. That's separate. But the software company, they'll pay them a percentage of what they raise. So it might be that I charge you some nominal fee up front, say $79, but then I'm really getting paid by charging you 3% of what you raise. And that's in addition to credit card processing fees. This is great for smaller groups that want to get started out at a low commitment. The price scales with the fundraising activity or the fundraising success. That's appealing to a lot of people. I think it's a legitimate way to go. We do also sell our software on that basis if, for groups that are just getting started. There's a third business model out there, and it's the one I want to warn everybody off of. It is relatively new to our industry. It's popped up about 3-4 years ago. I think it's insidious. And it's a business model that seems really great, where they go to an organization, the two companies that pursue this business model, and will say, you can have our software for free. You don't even have to pay credit card processing charges. You just get it for free. It's just yours. We want to help. We want to build schools. We're in this for the good of the country. Okay. As marketers, I'm suspicious, but And here's the trick. They reserve the right to ask every guest at the auction for a tip. And they are software developers. They're good with user interfaces, and user interfaces can be designed, as we all know as marketers, to manipulate towards certain outcomes. And they're very good at asking for tips. And the main company that does this, they'll put it on their website. They'll say that 95% of your guests will tip a full 15% of their bill. Now, these companies take that money for themselves. It does not even flow through a nonprofit, so those tips are not tax deductible. And if you do the math, your entire fundraising community is paying an enormous amount, far more than you would pay in a license fee. And you may think, I don't care. I'm not paying it. It's the guests. They're paying it. But really, those guests are the ones who are taking their wallets out to support you.
Yeah.
So if they weren't paying that, it might be more for you.
And I
And
don't think
indeed,
it's
it would be
always clear
tax
you're
deductible.
paying the software company, because I've come across
It's
that, and
not.
listening to you talk, I'm like, I know that I've tipped and I didn't realize what I was doing.
Yeah.
Get to the end and you're just clicking buttons too.
Yeah. Well, and see, the thing is that the mechanism is ingenious and it
Yeah,
works pretty well. So when we saw this come out, we decided we wanted to build a tipping feature in, but we did it differently, where the tips don't pay any vendors directly. They're just extra fundraising for the organization, so the organization can cover their bills later on.
right.
And I think that's fine. And if you can use the tipping mechanism to squeeze a few more bucks out of your guests for the organization at the end of the night, that's great. Having them paying the vendors directly when what they think they're doing is supporting your organization is a little underhanded. I dislike that
Definitely.
model intensely.
Well, that's great advice and something for everybody to look out for, not just for when they're looking for software platforms, but also when they're making donations
Yeah,
as
when you're
well.
making a donation at the event,
For sure.
I really don't like the message that it sends from an organization to the guest. Should the guest find out what's going on? Like you've just sort of realized what's going on here. And now you can map that back and think, hey, why why weren't why weren't they paying for the software license? Why were they relying on all of us to cover it for them?
So it sounds like funding model, how do you fund your softwares, is a great question to ask when you're interviewing any vendor, really any fundraiser
Absolutely.
vendor. Are there anything else that people should be asking or looking out for as they work with different vendors and organizations to support their fundraising?
Um, Support. You really want to know in advance in a detailed way what is available to you, what you might have to pay extra for, how you're going to be supported both before the event and then during the event, how late that support goes. you know? On event night, you really should be able to get telephone support up until midnight or so, you
Oh,
know?
that's very true. Yeah, if the
You know?
technology goes down, who's gonna be there?
Who's gonna be there, you know?
Right.
And it's usually on a Saturday night
Mhm.
and et cetera, et cetera. When we got into the business 20 something years ago, every company that was already in it had a reputation for terrible customer support. That's changed. That is no longer what I will tell everybody. Everybody's gotten a little bit better. But I will say that that was something that on day one we decided was a differentiator that was available to us. It was something that if we wanted to seize that and use it to market our company, it was available. We could do that. And so, given that we are a scrappy, bootstrapped company, we decided we would grab any differentiator we could. And it's less of a differentiator 20 years later than it once was, but it is still probably the most important thing to ask about. Um, I would say that, there's various feature sets that I could talk about the value of, but really that's going to be a decision on an individual organization basis. For the most part, understand how you're going to be billed, how credit cards are going to be processed, what the support is. And I do like to say about my competitors that you can run a successful event with any of their software. You absolutely can. You're not going to go wrong in terms of the ability to produce a functioning event, regardless of what you choose. So focus on the business models, focus on how the software company gets paid. Understand that. Understand that nobody is giving you their software. You may be doing good in the world, and that's great, but those of us that work on it for a living need to get paid. So we will charge you something. And it's just, you know, if it looks too good to be true and all of the costs are hidden, you got to do a little work. You got to probe a little harder. You got to really understand it before you get into bed with them.
Right. Excellent advice. Well, I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. I think this is such a relevant topic to so
Yeah.
much of our audience. And before we sign off, everybody loves real world examples, and you gave such a great example from Portland State.
Yeah.
And we didn't get a chance to talk about Eastern Washington's auction on a
Oh,
football
we
game, and
definitely
I'd
should have.
love for you to share that with the audience.
Eastern Washington did a great thing a few years ago, and it stretched us. It pushed us a little bit. Um, they were going to do an auction of signed jerseys during a football game. I mean, during the football game, actually during halftime.
Yeah.
But they wanted everybody in the stadium to stay in their seats and look at the Jumbotron and bid using their phones.
Right.
And I was like, God, that's fun. That's amazing. So we built a display to help coordinate for the Jumbotron. And then we had to be very careful in timing, the invitations going out. We had to be careful about the network load because if you think about it, there's not that many cell towers immediately around a stadium. You
Right.
don't want to overload them, but it turned out great. It was so much fun. Yeah, and they made money. Made a lot of money.
That is great. It sounds so easy, but I'm sure it wasn't as easy as it sounds.
It wasn't the most complicated fundraiser. It was a relatively straightforward one. I mean, it had some technical challenges, but we were eager for those. It's like, that's cool. Let's do something. Let's do something big here.
That's what you live for, is solving those
Exactly.
problems.
Yeah, and they had 8,000 people participate in this silent auction. That's a big audience. So,
Well, great example. And Roger, thank you so much for being a guest. If people want to learn more about schoolauction.net or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
well, the website is www.schoolauction.net. Let's start there.
Okay.
You can always get in touch with me. You can find me all over the place
Okay.
there. Reach out. We'd love to talk to you. I'll give you my email address. It's simply roger@schoolauction.net. And I'll talk to anybody. Give me a call. Tell me about your program. Tell me what you want to do. Tell me your frustrations. We'll figure something out.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being a guest.
I appreciate it, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me.